WNBA expected it. A player who doubted every shot she made and silently feared that today would be her release. She struggled to secure a berth on the team during her first 2 seasons. Then, in an instant, everything changed. In addition to having the biggest transformation in women's basketball history, Lexie Hull also became one of its most fascinating stories. And now, after going through Caitlin Clark's storm for years, she has finally shared what it has been like. Not the polished media version, but the real one. She revealed something that nobody really expected to hear before any of this made sense. You also need to understand where Lexie Hull was before Caitlin Clark came into Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Hull was chosen by the Indiana Fever with the 6th overall pick in the 2022 draft. On paper, it sounds like a dream. 6th overall top 10 options. A Stanford graduate won a national title, 3 All-Pac, 12 honors, and the class and top 90 awards for her outstanding academic and athletic accomplishments in her last season. This was supposed to be the start. Rather, it became a struggle that most outsiders never really recognized because of the terrible illness during those early years. Not quite as good. They suffered losing seasons and missed the playoffs entirely, making them one of the league's worst teams. But in order to make the squad, Hull had to struggle throughout. This is not a situation that any young player wants to be in. Every single night was important. Every object has a bad connotation. She knew that she was acting fearfully. During her first 2 seasons, she averaged less than 5 points per game. During her second season, she performed for about 20 minutes every night, yet she only received 6 points. The numbers are correct. Something was holding her back. Hull would later pinpoint that item exactly. She was among the few athletes who dared to discuss those formative years in public. Check out what she told Glamour magazine. "I occasionally feared that if I didn't shoot, I might be benched or cut. Someone with outstanding credentials, a Stanford alumnus, or a top 10 draft pick are all lying awake, fearing that one lost chance may ruin their lives. That's what it was like to be on a losing team with nothing to cheer yourself up." She said, "Those early years were really nerve-wracking. A losing culture, no space for error, and no playoffs. There was too much at risk to win. As a result, everything was significant. Furthermore, that kind of pressure has an impact on more than just your shot. It gets into your head. It changes how you breathe, move, and think when you're on the court." But something happened that changed not only Lexie Hull's career but also the entire trajectory of the team and even the status of American women's basketball in general. No one outside was observing the Fever, and Hull was choking. The Indiana Fever selected Caitlin Clark 1st overall in the 2024 WNBA draft. In case you need a refresher, here's a quick summary of Caitlin Clark's persona at the time. Most honored scorer in NCAA basketball history, irrespective of gender. A player who, on her own, obliterated decades-old records, made Big Ten women's basketball a must-watch event, and converted Iowa Hawkeyes games into sellouts and nationally televised events. The WNBA as a whole was set to put the frenzy surrounding her, which had never been witnessed for a women's basketball player, to the test. It was sincere. Her status as the most important player in the league was cemented by her debut season's record-breaking productivity and fan interaction. The Indiana Fever suddenly became the most talked about, controversial, and well-respected team in the WNBA. Everywhere they went, there was a media frenzy, sold-out audiences, and national broadcasts. Caitlin Clark was spotted by Lexie Hull sporting the Indiana Fever shirt. It's rare to talk about Caitlin Clark's influence on her colleagues. There were additional factors to take into account besides visibility. Larger audiences, sponsorship agreements, and the cameras that followed them weren't the only reasons. The key difference, according to Lexie Hull, is what happens within the Lions throughout a game. Something that is essentially invisible unless you know what you're looking for. Caitlin Clark has a different view of the floor than almost everyone who has ever played this game. She's got a great idea for the court. She has a certain depth. Coaches are also inspired by her ability to entice defenders. Open perimeter shooters have no obstacles to overcome. For someone like Lexie Hull, who had been tormenting herself over every shot attempt for 2 years, it was very liberating. Hull's depiction of the changeover takes on new significance when you take into account what came before it. After Clark arrived, she said, "I know I'm going to get open shots, but I don't need to worry about whether they go in or not because I've put in the work to set myself up for this, and I'll live with the outcome. The numbers supported the type of freedom that is only possible when the pressure valve is finally opened. Hull had a 47% three-point shooting percentage in 2024. 1%. It was one of the top shooting performances in the league that year and a lifetime best. Her three-point percentage dropped back to 36 as a result of those looks. 7%, just as it had been in college before Clark passed away. The stats tell the story even more effectively than the words. But the court wasn't the only place where things changed. The plot starts to get much more interesting at this point. This is due to the fact that the off-court relationship between Lexie Hull and Caitlin Clark caused controversy, garnered media attention, and became one of the most talked-about topics in women's sports. When Clark was selected, many were somewhat concerned about how she would adapt to a locker room full of strangers. During her 4 years at Iowa, she had played with Gabby Marshall and Kate Martin, her childhood co-workers. When she arrived in Indiana, she was the brand's new face in a room where everyone else had previously established relationships. The concern was real. Would she fit in well? Would her attention irritate the current players, or would they welcome her? And in reality, this is what happened. Almost immediately, she fell in love with Lexie Hull. At the conclusion of that first season, they were hanging out off the court in Indianapolis. They were laughing, trying out various drinks, and uploading together on TikTok as if they had been friends for years. Clark may also benefit from some sun exposure, Hull quipped to People magazine in one of the most hilarious remarks of the off-season. Hull made light of Clark's lack of sun exposure when he shared pictures from Fever Media Day on Instagram with the message, "We are so, music, back." It was the kind of taunting that only occurs in friendships when both parties are genuinely at ease with one another. Additionally, it provided the WNBA fan base with a first-hand peek at the players' personalities. Music, Hull stated that Clark will attend her wedding, which has been scheduled since Hull and Pittsburgh Pirates outfielder Will Matson got engaged in April 2025. Before being selected in the 6th round of the 2019 MLB draft, Matson was a standout baseball player at Stanford, where the two first crossed paths. He moved to Indianapolis to be with Hull after retiring from baseball due to a string of ailments, which speaks much about the foundation of her life. Even if everything has been friendly and happy, Hull made the decision to confront a side of playing with Caitlin Clark in a way that most people in her position would have ignored or completely avoided. And it's the aspect of this tale that merits the greatest focus. 2025 was one of the WNBA's most tumultuous seasons ever. Hull characterized Clark's arrival as having a specific demeanor, a seriousness, a focus, and an edge that implied she had completed her adjustment and was prepared to rule. How Hull informed reporters prior to the season that Clark's second year was clearly different. "It's obvious that she's here and prepared to conduct business," according to Hull, and that read appeared to be perfect at first. Hull was playing the best basketball of her music career through the first 7 games of 2025, leading the WNBA in three-point percentage at 55 and scoring more than 10 points per game. 6%. The Fever appeared to be a cohesive team at last. Then the wounds began. Clark missed a lot of games due to his quad problem. Then there was a groin problem. There was then another soft tissue issue. One of the most devastating pictures of the season was taken on July 15th, when Clark suffered his 4th injury in just a few months during a game against the Connecticut Sun. After giving it her all and witnessing everything go apart, Clark appeared to be holding back her tears as she got off the floor, rested her forehead on the basket structure, and sat on the bench with a towel over her face. And Lexie Hull was sitting next to her, just as a true friend would when words fail to convey their emotions. Hull later discussed Clark's leadership position at the time in an honest manner. "Why me?" queries. Despite putting forth more effort than anyone else in the building, she was upset that her body would not cooperate. It was a challenging chapter. The Fever won despite Clark missing a large portion of the season. They persevered all the way to the WNBA semifinals, where they defeated the eventual champion Las Vegas Aces in a crucial Game 5 that required overtime prior to Indiana's final defeat. Hull's two-way persistence, which isn't evident in a box score, was a major factor in the run. Taking command, defending the top perimeter scorer on the opposing team every night and making music plays that kept games close when the team needed them, she continued to consider a topic that she ultimately concluded the general public should be aware of. Lexie Hull decided to quit being cautious with her remarks after the October 2025 Women of the Year feature in a beauty magazine. Along with Nelissa Collier-Jones and the Sabali sisters, she was one of 5 musicians highlighted in music. For someone who had quietly established himself as one of the league's most regarded players, this distinction was fitting. However, her engagement, attire, or basketball statistics are unrelated to the parts of that interview that went viral online. Hull made it clear that it focused on the disadvantages of facing the most well-known female athlete. I think there is some envy over the Fever because of the media exposure and the people who have stood beside us since Caitlin came. On its own, that would have been sufficient to generate headlines. But then she went farther. She claimed that the Fever have heard what other teams have to say, as opposed to conjecture or outside rumors. Hull said they've heard players and teams in other locker rooms stating they can't let the Fever win. The Target song is authentic. It's true that every team puts forth extra effort when they play Indiana, and Hull has been at the heart of it ever since Clark arrived. Her response to everything is fascinating because of what she chose to do with it. She made no complaints. She didn't behave in a victimized manner. She leaned in and played some music. It's okay if something outside of our control gives you more desire to defeat us, Hull said. Yes, because Caitlin Clark draws attention from sources other than fans, cameras, music, and sponsorship deals. Great if that's what it takes for you guys to come and put in extra effort. Everyone ought to believe that they are receiving the best from everyone else. We do, in my opinion, get everyone else's best. Being at the center of one of the most contentious situations in women's sports is handled in a remarkably calm manner. It covers opponents who designate all of Indiana's games as postseason contests. Included are referees under a microscope. Music, people who have never been to a professional basketball arena watch, record, discuss, and weaponize every move a Fever player makes. And Lexie Hull has lived in all of it for the past 2 years. She has seen it directly in a way that no outsider could. And when she finally decided to speak her truth, she did it with a clarity that cuts through the cacophony. There is something worth considering when looking at Lexie Hull's whole journey. She also joined a league as a talented player on a poor team, EW, Lexie Hull. It was the kind of mocking that only happens in friendships when people are truly comfortable with one another. It also gave the WNBA fanbase a first-hand look at the player's personality. The wedding, which has been planned since Hull and Pittsburgh Pirates outfielder Will Matson became engaged in April 2025, will be attended by Clark, according to Hull. The two originally met at Stanford, where Matson was a standout baseball player before being chosen in the 6th round of the 2019 MLB draft. After retiring from baseball owing to a series of illnesses, he relocated to Indianapolis to be with Hull, which says a lot about the basis of her life. Hull chose to face a side of playing with Caitlin Clark in a way that most people in her situation would have disregarded or avoided, despite the fact that everything has been cordial and joyful. And it's the part of this story that deserves the most attention. One of the most challenging seasons in WNBA history was 2025. Hull described Clark's arrival as possessing a certain manner, a seriousness, a focus, and an edge that suggested she had finished adjusting and was ready to take charge. How Hull told reporters before the season that Clark's second season was obviously different. According to Hull, it's clear that she's here and ready to do business, and at first, that red seemed ideal. Through the first 7 games of 2025, Hull was playing the best basketball of her career, scoring more than 10 points per game and leading the WNBA in three-point percentage at 55.6%. At last, the Fever seemed to be a cohesive unit. Then the injuries started. Clark's quad issue caused him to miss a number of games. Then there was an issue with the groin. Then there was another soft tissue problem. During a game against the Connecticut Sun on July 15th, Clark sustained his 4th injury in only a few months, resulting in one of the most heartbreaking photos of the season. After doing her hardest and seeing everything fall apart. As she rose from the floor, laid her forehead on the basket structure, and sat on the bench with a towel over her face, Clark seemed to be holding back her tears. And, as a genuine friend would do when words cannot express their feelings, Lexie Hull was seated by her. Hull later spoke candidly about Clark's leadership role at the time. "Why me?" queries. She was frustrated that her body would not cooperate even though she was working harder than anybody else in the building. It was